Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. Reverend Carter's website is michaeljscarter.com. You can go take a look at it. Reverend Carter is originally from Baltimore. He moved to New York in 1980, and he's lived there for over 25 years, working as a professional actor before moving to Asheville with his family. Michael is an ordained interfaith minister and received his BA degree in letters from the College of New Rochelle, where he graduated cum laude. He received his master's in divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City. While serving various Unitarian Universalist congregations in New York, Reverend Carter was trained as an anti-racism trainer and has been recognized by President Clinton for his efforts. He talks and speaks at so many different UFO conventions. He's written articles on UFOs and religion for such publications as UFO Magazine, Alien Encounters, a British publication, and the MUFON UFO Journal, Contact Forum, and Space Newsletter. Without any further delay, let's go ahead and get him on the line, because I think we're going to learn a lot and definitely have some fun. Reverend Carter, good evening. Welcome to Fringe Radio and K-Talk, my friend.
Hey, brother. It's good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you here, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your Saturday night and your weekend to spend time with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and a shout-out to, like you said, to Bill Forte, who set this up, and he's a gentleman and a scholar. I just wanted to say hey, and I'm glad we could do this. I'm glad we could make this happen.
Well, I'm glad we could make it all connect. I just read a scratch the surface on your bio, Reverend, but maybe you could give our listeners a little bit of your background and some of the things that you've done, and then we'll get into talking about your books and your beliefs and some things. I want to get your opinions on so many different things, and of course you were just at Contact in the Desert. I would love to talk about that with you. Why don't you go ahead and kind of give our audience a little background?
Okay. I was raised and born in Baltimore, Maryland. My parents had worked for the government. My dad was the supervisor of telecommunications. My mom was a stenographer. And I was raised in the African-American church tradition and was very involved. But I also attended other churches, the Lutheran Church, and I just attended a lot of other worship houses, if you will. And I was not a Trekkie. I know you mentioned that. I just started watching. I'll be 58 years old, July 9th, and I just started watching Star Trek maybe a year ago.
Wow.
Which is great, because that way, when I tell my story, people can't say, well, wow, he's probably got that from Star Trek or what have you. And I've really only watched one Star Trek episode. I'm into Deep Space Nine. I got my daughter watching it too, but that's another story. And I just grew up in that kind of evangelical, the Bible says what it means and means what it says, and I'm saved and you're not. I grew up in that. And my parents weren't heavy-handed with it, but it was there. And, of course, as a child, you always want to please your parents. But I was very involved with the church. But my beliefs started to change, as they often do as we grow and evolve. And I just started meeting people from different backgrounds and started thinking differently, reading some philosophy and, how life goes. I have a 9-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. And she and I are very close. And I live here in Asheville, moved here from New York about 10 years ago. Very different from living around concrete all the time to here in the mountains, but it's lovely. And, I'm just very grateful.
Wow. Sounds like a beautiful place.
It really is. Well, it's all, it's a Cherokee. The reservation's probably about an hour from where we live, but it's just very green. It's very lush. And Asheville has some of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet, but we're right here in Appalachian Mountains, and it is very beautiful. I mean, I do miss New York at times, but there are worse places to live. So really very fortunate.
What is it? It's we. I'm a native Chicagoan, and I moved here to Salt Lake City. It's been over 20 years, and of course, Chicago will always be home for me. just like I'm sure Baltimore will be for you. But it's amazing. I look out the window every day when I get up and look at these glorious mountains. Of course, we're on the back end of the Rockies. It's where the Rockies stop from the east to west, and
wow,
it's just amazing to look at those mountains. People that have lived here their whole life consider them an inconvenience because first to get from one side to the other is quite a task and a journey. But when you've grown up in the flatlands of the Midwest, it's a beautiful sight.
It's a beautiful sight. Yeah, it's like when I lived in New York. I mean, all the touristy stuff, you're granted until you're not there.
Right.
And so, yeah, but I mean, listen, it's a beautiful country. My dad used to travel a lot for work right before his retirement, and, he was saying, yes, people can go to Europe and, go to other continents. He said he would love to do that. He said, but there's some beautiful places right here in North America that are really worth seeing. So I'm very fortunate.
Well, and so many people, like, you've lived in New York City. I've lived in Chicago. To be honest, I didn't live in the city. I lived in the suburbs, of course. But,
sure.
We sometimes take things for granted. Tourists come in to see New York City. They come in to see Chicago. They come in to see L.A. And I think most people, and I'd put myself into that category, I haven't covered a tenth of what's available in the big cities. And it's
no, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And you know what? At least living in New York, and I love New York, I did not find people to be unfriendly and what have you, but I knew that it was time to leave New York. When I used to be in the theater, and so I did a summer stock production of Evita and Jesus Christ Superstar, and we were in New Hampshire, and most of the cast, the people who got hired, were from New York. And there was a wealthy family there. They were patrons of the arts. And they would invite the cast to their home for home-cooked meals. They had a little swimming pool. I availed myself readily to that. It was just wonderful. But a lot of the New Yorkers, they were like, well, what's the angle? What do they want? And a lot of them wouldn't take these people up on it. And I was like, my God, when people are being nice to you and you're suspicious,
right.
Something, there's something a little off. But one day I was walking on 57th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. I was late for a meeting. I was with a friend, and a big bag of trash. Someone had thrown some trash out of a high-rise, and it landed like just a few feet from where we were walking. And my friend had, I think, the normative response. I won't use the expletives, but he was like, holy shit, because if it had hit one of us, it would have ruined our day. Mm-hmm. My reaction was, come on, we got to go. We got to get on the subway. And that's just not normal. So I started believing I was getting numbed out, and it was time to get out of New York. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, things happen, but I'm glad I'm here, and it's a calmer lifestyle. It's a quieter. I can look up at the sky and see the stars, and
right.
Well,
let's start out with that statement that you just made. You look up and you look at the stars.
Oh my goodness!
How's that for a segue? How did you get into your interest? And I want to talk about. I would like to discuss a little bit about Contact in the Desert. But how did you get into the whole UFO? The whole game. I shouldn't say game's the wrong word.
No. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It is a game in some ways, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I'm learning now. I got out of the theater because I wanted to serve. I mean, I was good at what I did, and I get a pension when I'm 62 from one of the unions. But I when you're so busy focusing on yourself,
right?
It's hard to serve.
Right.
And to be an actor, not unless you're Denzel Washington or Meryl Streep. Even them, you still audition for stuff. So I was constantly looking for work, but I also wanted to serve. But I'm noticing with being in the UFO community, whatever that word means, I got to send out a bio. I've got to constantly, make sure, I have a publicist now who does a wonderful job. She's over, Susan Dan. She's in Oregon. But it's a lot like a bit, I'm going to a conference. Well, I mean, I've had people ask me for footage of myself at other conferences, and I'm like, wait a minute. this is like I'm in the theater all over again. So, having said that, my first encounter as an adult was December 28th, 1989. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're talking about coming from the background that I told you before, and I was in I was on the Yucatan Peninsula with my girlfriend at the time. We went to see the pyramids in Chichen Itza and Tulum, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And got back home to New York. And I had been invited to a party, and I was kind of tired. I really didn't want to go, but there was that ego part of me that said, come on, show off your tan. You out in the sun. These people are freezing. So I went. And, just stayed for about 90 minutes, had some finger food. No adult beverages were consumed, at least not by me. And I went back to Times Square, got on the subway, and went home. That night, I don't know whether I just felt a presence in the room. I don't remember getting up to go to the bathroom, but I turned around, and on the edge of my bed, there was an individual who was chalk white colored. He had, and I'm assuming it was a jumpsuit that looked like Reynolds wrap. A pear-shaped head, the eyes, the phenotype of what we would call a gray, mm-hmm. Short, maybe 4 feet tall, and stared at me. Now, my girlfriend, she just never woke up. I don't know. It was like she wasn't there. She was just out. I thought that I was going to have a heart attack.
Wow.
And so what I did was, and the being was, the brother had a blue light around him, like a cobalt blue light, and my room was lit up. Now, this was at 45 West 81st Street in the Excelsior Hotel between Columbus Avenue and Central Park West. This was in the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Okay.
And so I pulled the cover up over my head, hoping this was not true or it would go away. And when I did that, I heard a sound like and I felt like I was outside. The temperature change was just that drastic. And I started to panic. But when I pulled the covers off of me, and no one was in the room.
Wow.
It was no one there. It was quiet. And I feared for my sanity, obviously. And because this started happening for 6 to 8 months every full and new moon. So I was getting visited twice a month, but this time I'd be paralyzed. So I went to a bookstore called the Strand Bookstore in Soho, because I read a lot. And I saw a book. I went to the UFO section, and I just felt embarrassed because, I was like, come on, this is not really happening.
Right.
So I went, and I picked up a book called Encounters by Dr. Edith Fiore. And I went to to buy it, and I felt like I was a teenager buying condoms for the first time. I mean, I just felt, I was, and the guy looked at me and he said, is this a hobby? I bought several other books. Or is this for real?
I wrote that one down, Michael. I got to use that one.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I just felt, I was the stigma. I just felt, oh, my God. I said, it's for real. So not only did he, of course, he rung everything up and I had to pay for it, but he told me about a support group. But in the back of this book called Encounters, and I highly commend it to anybody who's going through this, there was a list in the back of mental health professionals who specialize in whatever the hell I was going through at the time. I mean, I was seeing beings in my room. And so that got me on. And I later got regressed. Dr. Jean Mundy, she's passed on. She was one of the names in the back of the book. She was located in New York. Several years later, the late Bud Hopkins, we were at a conference together in Long Island, and he said, I'd like to regress you. And I said, fine. But by then, I knew I knew that I wasn't crazy. And what had happened was, I'm not a nuts and bolts person, so I'm not into propulsion systems and back engineering. I mean, I'm sure all that stuff is really wonderful. I'm a clergy person, okay? So I'm more interested in the spiritual or religious ramifications of these encounters. So that's where it led me to look at world religions, to look at, the Bible, the Quran, and to see if they were there. And they are there, at least in my interpretation. But that's the truncated version of how I came upon this. My master's thesis was my first book. I would not even talk about my own personal encounters until the first publisher I had, little mom and pop publisher out in Arizona, they said, Michael, you've got to put your experiences in the book. So I came out of the closet, as it were, and I don't regret that I have, but I'm also happy because Union Theological Seminary, which is one of the top seminaries in the country, they allowed me to use this topic, because many seminaries would have said, Mr. Carter, you're not graduating from here writing about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. How many visits, I think you mentioned, but how many visits did you have?
I continue to have them.
Okay.
So, I've seen 3 different races. Now, there are times when I've gone years without having one. Now, when I say visits, I mean in my room, touch me kind of visits. Now, I've had dreams and that kind of stuff, and just because you're having a dream about something doesn't mean necessarily that's not really happening. The last visit that I've had was probably in 2014. But I went several years. It was interesting. When I gotten married the second time and, we had a child and that kind of thing, I wasn't getting them so often. It was almost like, well, he's busy. He's got some earthly things he needs to take care of. But I still have visits. And, I don't know what else to say. Am I still afraid? Yeah, but not so much from them, even though sometimes they can look very bizarre. But just the mere fact, like tonight, let's say if somebody decides they're going to visit Michael tonight, my doors are like, that's what gets me. The doors are locked, the air conditioner's on, and then to get up to go to the bathroom or just to turn over and see, that's more of a shock. I would have that reaction if it was a human being standing there.
Sure. Do they, Michael, what type of communication takes place? Do they converse with you? Do they?
Well, they did towards the later contacts. In the beginning, no. It was pictures. It was not, no mouths were moving like we do. Mm-hmm. There would be pictures showing where my third eye is, mm-hmm. Of what they wanted me to know. In more recent years, I've had beings look at me and say something, but I would hear it like a stereo system in my head, like their mouths wouldn't move, but I would hear the voice, whether it was a male voice or a female voice. Right. The content usually was what they were getting ready to do. One time I had a needle stuck in the back of my head where my spine and the hollow part where my neck is, and it really, 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 really hurt. And I was really, 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 really upset. By this time, I was in a support group. I was talking to people about it, and someone gave me some good advice. They said, if you want to know what some of these folks are about, then just put some boundaries up. Just say, look. And I'm not saying this works with everybody, and I know it doesn't. And it didn't always work with me. But I was so angry, and I said, you can't do this. I'm not sleeping, and they heard me because a couple of weeks later when I had a visit, they showed me a picture of a syringe, and they stuck it in the crown part of my head. I could barely feel it. Wow. I took that as, well, they heard me. So things started to change. I had a wider perspective I was more self-reflective. My intuitive abilities were really heightened, and my hair grew really fast. I do energy healing work, probably thanks to them, but I just have such a tremendous amount of energy. So those were the physiological changes. I don't need as much sleep, and that's good. I mean,
it is a good
I don't
thing.
want to abuse it, but that's good. I mean, those were like I said, my hair and nails grow very quickly. But what really transformed was my outlook about life. I really started to be more sensitive. intuitively and how I looked at life. And I stopped believing in this, not that I ever really did, to be honest with you, but seeing through the places where I believed that the separateness that we all believe in. And that really dissipated even more so. I started caring more about the earth. I didn't give a hoot about the earth. I just wasn't at that level of consciousness. You know, and so I started really seeing and feeling that what I do to you really does affect me on some level. And so, of course, I had to get out of the religious denomination that I was in because it was, and I don't want to denigrate it, it wasn't good for me anymore. And so that us versus them, I'm saved, you're not, I just didn't feel like that advanced any conversations. I also found a new consciousness where I wasn't a victim, that I had to be accountable, that I may not be able to control what people do to me, but I must be able to have a handle on my own reactions. No matter what. And that made me even more contemplative about what it means to be accountable, what it means to be human. And this was gradual now. This wasn't, and there were ups and downs, you know, and, you know, I was in therapy for a while, coming from the background that I came from, dealing with my own, I mean, it wasn't magical. You know, I still have, like, I just had to leave a marriage I didn't want to leave just very recently. So it wasn't like my life was a panacea of just all sweetness and light, but I could cope. I could be more self-reflective. When I had fear, I lived my life less fearfully now, but I had to, the fear that I had from them, yes, very bizarre people looking, some of them, but I took that metaphor of fear, and then I said, Michael, where else in your life is fear holding you back? So I just kind of took the events of my life and just said, what lessons are there here? And that way, that helped me kind of move past the fear into a deeper sense of love.
We got a caller. You want to take a quick call?
Sure. Yeah, we got hours. Yeah.
Oh, we do. Okay, hold on. Caller, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk. You're on with Michael Carter.
Hey, Pat, my friend. How are you? It's Bill.
Hey, Bill. How are you?
Hey, Brother Mike. How is everything?
Oh, you did call in. You said you would. Hey, man. How are you?
Good. Everything's good. How was your return after contacting the desert?
It took me a while to get acclimated because going through those time zones and, you know, you didn't get much sleep there. so I bounced back. I mean, you know, like I was just telling Pat, I mean, I'm just running on fumes here, but I can do that for a while, but after a while it catches up with me. But it was a wonderful experience, and, I mean, if they called me, I'd do it again. It was great. It was an honor to be around all those people, too.
Yeah, that was like the Woodstock of UFO conferences.
Yes, that's what someone called it. It was really nice. I mean, you know, I had a booth right next to Travis Walton, and, you know, I had worked with Eric Van Donigan before. It was just nice it was powerful to have like-minded people. You know how it is. It's like if you pray on one thing or if you meditate, all those minds focused on one thing is very powerful.
Okay. Now, Mike, you mentioned that initially there was fear, but would you consider when you had the initial encounter that it was spiritual in nature and it may have led to an enlightenment that led you to write the books you have regarding the possible ET connection to Holy Scriptures and other religious texts?
You know what? Unequivocally, yes, Bill. Indeed, it did. Now, well, no, it did, period. End of story. However, the fear thing, yeah, like I just said to Brother Pat, I said, Pat, you know, and he could understand, you know, if I came to your house tonight and I didn't unannounced and your door's locked and you wake up and you see me standing over you, I mean, it gets your attention. And so it was the trauma of that, but it made me look at, okay, fear of the unknown, fear of difference, Where else in my life am I letting that fear take over? Mm-hmm. Because there are some things you want to be afraid of. You don't walk down dark alleys in a bad neighborhood just to prove a point, But it's not about not being afraid, right? Because fear is not the absence of courage. Remember, it's moving on despite the courage.
Right.
But I wanted to look at where it was holding me back. I mean, Einstein says that the most basic question that human beings need to ask themselves is the universe a friendly place? Mm-hmm. If you come from a broken home or abandonment issues or what have you, the universe is not going to seem so friendly. And so part of the journey is looking through that illusion and looking where my past and my baggage is keeping me from moving forward. And so I definitely look at it as a spiritual experience, because in order to evolve, and the messages that I've gotten from them is that in order for us to go to the next level of human evolution, we're going to have to be able to wrestle with our fears and not react to them. I'm Tea Party, you're not. You like Obama, I don't. You're transgender, I'm straight. I mean, they don't care anything about that kind of stuff. They don't care about that, because in the whole scheme of things, it means nothing.
Exactly. You know what it is, too, Mike? There's so much fear-mongering when it comes to all the negative portrayals, when it comes to anything related to UFOs or alien entities, etc. And I'm thinking, with your background with these entities, because I'm sure there was more than one type of species. Now,
yeah, it was three of them, yeah.
Okay, so now do you believe that most of them are benevolent in nature, meaning they have good intention toward humanity? And what do you think, if they're here, what do you think their goal is for mankind?
Okay, to answer your first question, I think just like there are, and I feel that just like there are more evolved and less evolved humans, there are more evolved and less evolved off-world intelligences. And we have to remember that, because we get so blown away by technology. Technology doesn't necessarily lead to a deep spirituality. Just look at our planet. The beings that I have encountered, generally speaking, right, because there's so many of them, there's so many life forms. My God, I sound like a Star Trek out there. Anyway, but there's so many, and so they have come, the ones that I've encountered, okay, I want to be clear, this is Michael's experience, are not here to take over. They're not here to hurt anybody, or they're here to assist us in the next phase of our growth. But we fight too much.
Oh, yeah.
We are full of fear and rage and violence. And if we don't watch it, we're going to destroy ourselves. That's the message. It's not sexy. It's not new. Avatars and saints have been telling us this, but we never really listened to them. But this time the stakes are high, because we have the technology to destroy ourselves several times over. And so one of the reasons that the frequency of these visits occurred after World War II is because we split the atom over 2 civilian cities.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Fringe Radio. Our guest tonight is Reverend Michael Carter. Again, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Sure, thank you. And I just wanted to finish up. Yeah,
sure, let's pick back up. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was just the bottom line for me, the fear factor, and also, like I said, and after we split the atom over, let's be honest, they were not military sites. So we nuked, we barbecued some civilians. It's barbaric. And so it got their attention. And again, people say, well, maybe they'll come and save us or whatever. I don't know who they are, and I don't know what that means. But I do know that, we can be dangerous to ourselves, and we can spread that danger into space. And so it's gotten their attention.
Mike, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
After you were dealing with these initial encounters,
Yeah.
Did you struggle? Did you struggle with trying to like figure out exactly what was going on? And because a lot of people that have been abducted, let's say, or contactees, they need some type of group that they can they can interact with to assist them in dealing with and coping with the situation that they're involved with. Now, I know that I don't know if you still are engaged with FREE, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters.
Yeah.
Are you still currently having some type of role there? And if you are, can you tell the audience a little bit maybe about what FREE is all about?
Well, I'm still on paper with FREE. I know Ray Hernandez had left, and so, matter of fact, he just called me about a week or so ago. But basically, FREE is an organization that is using many things, but scientific data, if you will, data to work with experiencers and to about what we're seeing, how we're seeing it, about what things changed after the encounters, before the encounters. They're gathering data on all of this, which is a very good thing. One of my roles was to be, if anyone like me at one time was having troubles, dealing with the encounters, going to work every day, you have family, and these things are happening, I was going to be serving as sort of like a counselor. And so they've been going through some changes, and I don't know if those changes have been resolved, but that's what that was my role on the FREE advisory board. So in answer to your question, I was with a support group, Space. That was the name of the group, and that was the group that I was drawn to. I liked Bud as a person, Bud Hopkins, but I found that his group, at least for me, was more fear-based than most of the people there had talked about. And that's, I'm sure that was true. They had really nasty encounters with some of these brothers and sisters, sperm taken ovum, anal probes, just not really nice things going on. And that was real. But I was with a group that had a different kind of message and a different kind of encounter. So we weren't adversarial. Once in a while, the groups would get together, but you could see the definite perspective of, I've had some positive experiences, and the other camp was like, no, there's nothing positive about this.
Mm-hmm. Now, just referring back to our ancient past, our ancient history, I'm sure you did a lot of research when you were writing your books. Did you find any valid or credible, I would say, circumstantial evidence that indicated any extraterrestrial contact or witnessed sightings in any of the scriptures you researched?
Oh, yeah, and all of them.
All of them.
And let me just say at the outset, brother, the Bible can be used. I mean, the Bible was used to justify slavery, to justify, keeping brothers and sisters who happen to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and questioning marginalized. It was used to keep women barefoot and pregnant. The Bible is a book that can be used like any book in many, many ways. It's also a beautifully written book in terms of the Psalms and some of its poetry. That to me, that doesn't take away. But I think that one of the things that the Bible is a book telling us how our ancient ancestors were dealing with off-world intelligences. I think the stories about flying chariots, talking about Elijah and the book of Ezekiel, the book about Jesus, the New Testament stories, Jesus flying up in a cloud, the Exodus story. And I'm just giving you a truncated version. I could get into more detail if you wanted. Looking at Isaiah, I'm looking at the book of Isaiah now, chapter 40, verse 22. It reads, "It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain." Now, what does Isaiah know about the earth being a sphere? I was taught that didn't really come into play until Columbus time.
That's right.
Here we
You're
have
right.
someone writing, 5,000, 5,500 years ago, and he's saying it's a view from above. Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. That sounds like someone who's up in the air looking down. It's right there. Who stretches out the heavens like a chariot. I mean, when you read verses like that, one begins to wonder, well, hey, yeah, what's this brother really talking about? When you look at Job chapter 9, I'm looking in the Hebrew translation. Well, it's the English from the Hebrew, chapter 9, verse 9. Who made the bear and Orion and the Pleiades? What does Job know about the Palladian star system?
What's Mike?
Yeah.
I even did some research for something that I do, and the Dogon tribe in Africa, they had no astronomical background whatsoever, and they pretty much they showed the location. Well, they spoke about the location of a hidden dwarf star that was near, I believe Sirius, and it was discovered by astronomers in the 70s.
Right,
and
but the Dogon knew about it for centuries.
Exactly. So,
you have to ask, where are they getting this information? What else is so crucial, at least for me, is the Exodus story. Why? Because, see, there's no Judaism. There's no Jewish religion until after the Exodus. And if there's no Jewish religion, there cannot be Christianity, because Christianity comes out of Judaism, as does Islam. And so we have the three largest world religions coming out of a UFO experience. When the Hebrew tribe flees Egypt, what do? They follow the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. It's at least an unidentified flying object. It's intelligently guided. In the daytime, it looks like it's coming out of a cloud, the pillar of cloud by day, which we know modern-day UFO sightings people describe the same way. And at night, it glows. And they follow it, which means it's intelligently guided. And so I come to the conclusion that this is going on throughout the Bible. Jesus' birth. I mean, come on.
Oh, boy. I was going to ask that controversial question.
Yeah, man. Stars don't fly across the sky and shine lights down on mangers. That doesn't happen. If a star moved across the sky and stopped, you want to talk about tsunamis. You want to talk about earthquakes, because the whole gravitational pull of the universe would be. But we know ships do that. And when he says, I and my father, look, if your mother's human and your daddy isn't, that means you're not fully human. Let's just put it out there crudely. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. If my mom is human and my daddy isn't, that means I'm not all the way human.
Yes.
And it accounts for the miracle stories and what have you.
Mike, a lot of people, I won't say a lot, I'll say some people question the whole Jesus, origination from being from God, and was it possible that Mary had some type of encounter herself, and Jesus may be a hybrid? I mean, there are some.
That's what I'm saying. He's part human and he's part a star person. This is what Billy Meyer talks about in the Talmud of Emmanuel. There's some Native American tribes who talk about the star people, and that the man we know as Yeshua ben Yosef was a star person. But I mean, even if you just look at it like this, if this is my father, and I don't think he's using it metaphorically, and this is my mother, Ray Charles can see this person is a hybrid.
I got one final question, Pat, if I can.
Go ahead.
For Mike. Mike, do you believe that the Vatican is, I guess, maybe withholding some type of evidence other than the creation that they depict and they portray as far as the preaching the good word. And because we have a progressive pope, and it seems that he comes out with statements once in a while about the possibility of alien intervention and the preparedness of himself in the possibility of engaging with entities from outer space, even saying they may be of God's creation. So what do you think about both those points, that they may be withholding evidence in the vaults, and also this Pope's stance on the whole alien possibility of intervention?
I think that they do withhold stuff. I mean, that's what governments and big institutions do. They lie. That's how they stay in power. And that's just the way it is. It may not be right, but that's just the way it is. I think that the Catholic Church wants to be the headlight instead of the taillight on this issue. And yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff they're hiding. Jesus probably being married, probably teaching reincarnation and other teachings as opposed to resurrection. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but it's all speculation. But Catholicism, as well as Hinduism, they will do well when this comes out, even though disclosure, in my mind, is happening already. Why, you asked? I'm glad you asked me, Bill. Because they make room in their cosmologies for other deities. Hinduism has the Brahman, as the all that is. I guess we call it, yoga call it the force. So you have Brahman, and then you have these lesser gods, right? So, the extraterrestrial visitors can be looked at as lesser gods. The Catholicism does the same thing. You have God, and I put that in quotations, and then you have various saints, right? Mm-hmm. You have the hierarchy. You have various angels. You have various saints. So they won't miss a beat. It's the Protestant Christianity, Billy Graham, Franklin Graham. They're going to have a problem with this. They already are. And so what they're saying is, well, these are demons. And they focus on the Nephilim, or they'll focus on the Anunnaki. And we don't know if they were demons. We don't know all that. We could argue the Nephilim, but this is all speculation. But the reason why they're nervous, one of the reasons why, is because how do you explain these beings? But if you already have a cosmology or a Weltanschauung or perspective where you make room for greater gods and lesser gods and in-between gods, if you already have that hierarchy, well, then you just hit the ground running. You can just welcome them into the fold. God created them too. You also find in the literature that even the star people believe in an all that is. They may not use the word God, and they certainly don't look at God the way we do. You can tell when you make God in your own image because God hates all the same people you do. But they don't have that kind of concept. It's more of an energy. It's more of an intelligence. It's more of, and it's within everything. It's not like God is Santa Claus out there, and if I'm naughty, I'll be barbecued, and if I'm not, that's a primitive way of looking at how the universe works. And it's not primitive because people are stupid. It's primitive because it enforces separation. So I'm saved, you're not.
Right. Well, and it keeps order, too.
It does. Great. It does. But it's starting not to.
Right.
Yeah, but it does. It keeps people in a box. And you know how you keep them? It comes through fear. If the knee doesn't bow a certain way, if you don't say the prayer, if you live this way or not, if you don't live this way, and so it's all fear. And what they're trying to say, just like Jesus and Buddha and other great saints and avatars, male and female throughout history, they're trying to say, you don't want to be living in fear.
Right.
Love and fear do not go together.
One final question before I bid you goodnight, my friend Mike. Do you think that Revelations could have been a prophecy given by, I'll label it as entities, who could have possibly seen into our future, maybe even time travelers or interdimensional in nature, to try to warn us of our self-destructive behaviors and actions, thus maybe their return to save humanity?
I think Revelations is an interpretation. John's in exile from Rome. He's lucky they didn't kill him. He's writing this 90 years after Jesus has been crucified. And I believe that he's telling of probable outcomes. Now, are you asking me, is it probable that he was influenced by off-world intelligences? Look, we know in this field, in this topic, anything is possible. But I do know that what you focus on, you create. Mm-hmm. So I believe in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, that there are possibilities. I think what we've done with things like Revelation is that when you need more money, you don't focus on being broke.
Right. Hey, Mike, I got to stop you for a minute.
Yeah.
We got to take an NBC news break.
Okay.
Bill, you can stick around if you want, or we'll let Mike finish up on the other side.
I'll let Mike go. Mike, always a pleasure to speak with you. You know that, brother.
Yeah.
And Pat, I will talk to you soon. You both have a great night, and talk to you both soon.
Okay, sounds
All right,
good.
brother. Be well.